Alright, cool. So just for a quick outline of who this is for any current referee or someone who's aspiring to be a referee in any federation, any lifter or coach who wants to better understand the rules and how they're refereed, and how to best prepare and enable their clients to succeed through knowledge of the rules. Why am I doing this? Most federation-based refereeing training is we go through the rule book, then we have a quiz on the rule book. You go, okay, here are the 7 causes for disqualification in the squat, tick, 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 you're done. Some of the other training that's given is you sit next to a ref, as in shadowing a ref, you watch them make decisions, eventually they give you the controls, and now you're a referee. Or in a lot of cases, nothing. You don't get trained really. You may have to pass an exam, and it's probably open book, and that's about it. So there really isn't a lot of training out there. There's very little training out there in how to referee in practice, or anything that's more in depth than just reading through the rule. And the need for that generally is covered just by ad hoc chats between referees. You know, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? What does this rule mean? That sort of thing, which is good, but what I'm trying to do is just present something a little bit more comprehensive and a bit more structured, and hopefully that'll catch on. So what we're going to cover today is rule books and how to read them, how to learn the rules. Not going to, as I said before, not going to go through a rule book, but just an approach to learning the rules. Rules that are commonly misunderstood, how to manage yourself refereeing on comp day, technique and positioning on different lifts, communication with lifters and coaches, communication with other referees, training as a referee, leveling up as a referee, finding mentors and mentees, social media, and then just open Q&A. If you do have any questions related to what we're covering at the moment, just ask. That's all good. All right. So learning the rules. There's basically 2 approaches to learning the rules, observational and instructional. Observational is basically you watch comps and you pick up the rules over time. You go, okay, this passed and this didn't, and this must be why. It's a little bit like learning to drive by watching your parents. The problem with that is you can easily pick up bad habits because you don't actually know if your parents are good drivers or not, if you don't know how to drive. And similarly with powerlifting refs, you don't know if the refs that you're watching know what squat depth is, for example. You can make wrong inferences about why certain things happen. Like, for example, someone may pull a deadlift, they do that, they get red lights, someone goes, oh, ramping, you can't do that. In actual fact, you can. What you can't do is support the bar on the thighs, but you can pull it up your thighs. That's fine. But because nobody's explained what the rule actually is and you haven't read the rule, you're left to kind of work it out on your own. And as I said, you can make incorrect inferences from that. Another common one would be the press call on the bench is a 1 count pause on the chest is something I've heard people say. That's wrong. It's not the rule books at all. But if you're watching a comp and you see, oh, okay, it's a 1 count pause, because, yeah, you don't know the actual rule. There are certain rules that are important to know for when certain situations come up that don't come up very often, so you couldn't learn them just by watching a comp. Like, for example, if somebody gets misloaded and they're going to retake their attempt and they have to follow themselves to do that, how much of a break do they get between attempts? So you could watch 10 comps and that never happens, so you wouldn't know. But you need to know for when it does happen. If you read the rule book, then you could know that. Other things like the rules around attempt changes, and in particular federations, how that interacts with the order of lifting when lot numbers are in use. So the instructional approach is how people tend to learn at school. You've got reference material, you've got somebody actually teaching you the material. It does require some investment of time and effort, unlike the observational approach, which is you just pick it up in the course of doing other things. As I said, it allows you to learn about unusual situations you don't see very often. Another one would be, what happens if two lifters tie on total and body weight? Does anyone know?
You weigh out, is there a second weigh?
Correct.
Yeah.
They weigh in again.
Yeah.
Well, it's different in different feds.
Oh, yeah.
In GPC, for example, they weigh out, they call it weigh out.
Yeah, weigh out.
And then the lightest lifter wins. In other federations like APL, the one who achieves the total first wins.
Yeah, and I think if they weigh out and then the same again, it's shared, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah.
No, I think APL it's they weigh out and then the lightest lifter wins, and if they're still tied, then it's who achieved it first.
Yeah.
Whereas in GBC, if they tie on the way out, then they share it.
Who achieved it first? As in
who performed the lift that gave them that total.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So if it comes down to the last deadlift, it'd be the person who pulled their third deadlift first.
God, that's unfair, because if you're like a...
Well,
because it puts it on the deadlift. Because what if your best is... because it means the person who had the lightest third got it.
yeah, I mean, you just...
That makes no sense.
Take an extra piss before the comp, I guess.
Yeah. You just be... If you try with someone, just spit and tie their weight, just be spitting in cups for...
Yeah, well, since you would tie on the way out, you can just spit after you...
Yeah. After, yeah.
But yeah, or how thick is the deadlift bar? That's another one that you probably wouldn't pick up.
27 mil?
Yeah, correct, 27 mil. So reading through the rule book, most powerlifting rule books, as you probably will have picked up if you've read a few of them, they tend to be plagiarised from the same original rule books. So if you've read one, you probably have a pretty good idea of the general structure and a lot of the wording of other rule books. So yeah, but there are some sections that are definitely more important than other sections. And this is the general priority order that I would go in reading rule books. The first priority is reading the rules of performance. So these are the rules that govern whether you get a red light or a white light on lifts. Absolutely every ref should know these, and every lifter and coach should know these as well, but you know, they probably don't, but refs should definitely know them. The next priority would be things like the divisions, weighing in procedure, order of competition, personal equipment, basically what lifters can wear and what they can use, weight classes, the rules around tiebreakers, which we've brought up then, attempt changes, what happens on a misload, how big can a flight be, that sort of thing, how long is a break after each round on short flight. I would say at least the most senior ref at every comp should know these. All lifters and coaches should know the divisions and weight classes, and anyone who's aspiring to be a coach at a high level should know all of these, because it can govern your approach to things like attempt changes for strategic purposes. The next priority I would have in reading the rulebook would be competition equipment and bullshit around being a member of the federation, like you have to pay 43 euros to a PO box in the Czech Republic to be a member of some fed or something like that. Basically no rep needs to know that. But if you're the technical officer or the president of the federation, you probably need to know it. Or other stuff like how high can the top of the bench pad be off the floor, how much tolerance is there in the weight of the plates, what range of body weights do the scales have to support, how many benches do you have to have in the warm-up area at World Championships. Very few refs need to know these, but if you want to be like a world level ref or a technical officer in the federation, you probably need to know it. But yeah, that's after you've covered all the other stuff in the rulebook. So while the rulebook may be an intimidating read for some people, yeah, as I said, you prioritise certain sections, you learn what's most important, then progress to learn the other sections. It's generally best to go with a high frequency, low volume approach, trying to learn that. Just read a section, refresh it every few days, go over it until you remember it, discuss it with other referees. Don't be afraid to look ignorant by asking questions, because for me, it gives a much better impression that you care about knowing the rules than it is to not ask questions and pretend like you know it all, because when something happens in a comp, it's going to be pretty obvious whether you do it or not. I'll discuss all that stuff further in the later section on mentors and mentees. You can reinforce the rules around lifts in the gym, watching your teammates, checking their depth, giving them press calls on the bench, stuff like that. If they're preparing for competitions, you might go, your knees are a bit soft on your deadlift, that sort of thing. Or just walk around watching people and ref them in your head. That's what I do. Chat with coaches and stuff and reinforcing the procedural stuff like around how long they have to change opening attempts before the comp starts and all that stuff. All right. Any questions at this point? No? Cool. All right, so refereeing the lifts. Got some general principles to start with. For positioning, we have to be able to see everything that's in the lift that's relevant to the decision. We have to be able to see past the rack, we have to be able to see past the plates, we have to be able to see past the spotters. Those are the things that apply for pretty much every lift. A lot of the time it's better to sit further back as long as by doing that we're not getting obstructions in the way. Like if I'm right here, I can't see as much as if I'm here. Now obviously there's constraints like how long does the cord for the ref control go, where is stuff positioned around the platform, all that sort of stuff. But as a general principle, if you can be further back, a lot of the time it's better, as I said, as long as you're not putting yourself behind an obstruction. In some federations where the side refs signal that the lift is in correct starting position, raising their hand and dropping it, like in IPF or USAPL, the head ref needs to be able to see that, so you need to put yourself in a position where they're going to be able to see it. So I'm referring from back here, with that, head ref's not going to see it. So a lot of the time, I'll scope out the platform layout and see, okay, where would the head ref be able to see me? Do I need to do this or whatever? Usually, the federation rules say that you have to stay in your seat. I would say you should do that because it's in the rules, but on occasion you may have to get out of your seat because you just got no other option. There are some comp platforms where, for example, you might have the toaster racks that don't have wheels, you can't really move them, you've got two side spotters, you're going to have to get out of your chair and you're not going to see anything at all. But in general, stay in your seat. One thing that you can do, if you need to change your eyelid, without getting out of your seat, just put one hand on the floor. I'm still in the seat, my eye level's down here, and I can see butt coming off the bench quite easily. You may not need to do that, but it's one thing you can do if you need to change your eye level, bring it down for some reason. Yeah, and if you get the calls right, people aren't going to complain when you got out of your seat or not. That's what I find anyway. We want to maintain a consistent viewing angle from one lift to the next as much as we can. Not always going to be possible, but yeah, as I said, as much as we can. One principle that I use for positioning is I call framing, which is I guess a photography term. Think about what's in the shot and what's not. So I need to position myself in such a way that everything I need to see is in the shot. I don't want to fixate on any one thing in particular because I need to be able to see everything that's involved in the lift. This is really common on bench where, for example, people might get super fixated on the butt lifting off the bench, they miss foot movement, they miss bar dip. You need to be able to see all of the lift at once. So you've got to take into consideration, okay, what's in my frame here, what can I see, what do I need to see? And sort of see everything at once. Don't zoom in so close on one particular aspect that you miss everything else. What does the lockout look like? We don't have X-ray vision, and smaller limbs tend to have flatter contours at lockout. So, see, say, a 45 kilo lifter, they're probably not going to have a great deal of tricep and bicep development. arms just go flat. It's very easy to see when they're locked out. You get a 125 kilo dude, big arms, you know, they've got big muscle bellies, their arms don't look flat when they're at lockout. So, and the same thing applies to legs, you know, big quad development on bigger lifters. They often look like they're not locked out when they are. So what I like to do is just look how their arms hang and how their legs are when they're standing and walking around. On the bench, what will happen is, what will tend to happen a lot of the time is they'll unrack, extend, and then soften a bit. So if I see them do this, I know they need to come back to here. And if they do that, they're not meant to start there, because I know they can do that. Now in the rules, they should be coming to the head referee and say, look, I've got a mobility limitation, this arm only goes to here because I had a motorbike accident 15 years ago or whatever, that's fine, but I mean, a lot of people don't realise that they have mobility restrictions until you actually see them. So, as I say, just take account of what they look like walking around. When you can see that their joints are extended, then you'll know what the lockout looks like and you know what you need to look for. Don't try and run through all the rules as a mental checklist on every lift. I tried to do this when I was starting out and it was exhausting. You know, I'll be watching a bench and go, okay, are they touching the right place? They're touching, have their foot moved? Has the foot moved? Has the foot moved? No foot movement. Okay, pressing up, 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 up. Did it go back down? No. You imagine doing that for a whole flight, it's exhausting, as I said. So what I try and do now, and what approach that I advocate is, just watch the lift as passively as you can with a clear mind, and if something goes wrong, you'll see it, you'll notice it because you know the rules. Don't second guess yourself. If you saw something, it probably happened. Don't try and talk yourself out of making a decision because you think it might be unpopular, or you think that you're not good enough to judge that lift or whatever. As I said, if you saw it, it probably happened. And it helps to have the support of senior referees and meet directors. Like if you have a meet director you know that's going to back you, then yeah, you can be a lot more confident making a call. So you want to make the decision that your observation and your knowledge of the rules leads you to make. You don't want to guess, okay? But you don't want to look to introduce doubt in order to avoid making a tough call. See, a lot of people talk about benefit of the doubt goes to the lifter. I prefer not to phrase it that way because when you do, what people tend to do is they tend to try and like subconsciously introduce doubt to try and get out of it. You know, they'll see a high squat and go, oh wait, but it wasn't really high, maybe I didn't see it right. Oh, well now that's doubt, so it's white light. Okay. If the best decision that you can make based on the observation and knowledge of the rules is that it's high, then it's high. But as I said, don't guess. And by guessing, I'm talking about things like, if you were obstructed or if it was just too close to call, but yeah, you get the picture. You need to prioritise getting the call right above any emotional investment in the outcome of the lift or in pleasing others. So some people might say, I hate giving red lights. I don't hate giving red lights. I don't hate or love giving red lights. I hate making mistakes. Okay? If I see 10 high squats in a row and I call them all red, I'm good with that. I mean, I wonder why, but I don't feel bad because my job is to make the correct call. If you are a people pleaser, then you can think about the person that you're ultimately pleasing by getting the calls right is the meet director and the people in the federation. Because if you're passing lifts that, if you're making incorrect decisions, it may please the lifter, it certainly won't please everyone in the Fed in the long term. Okay? Because reputations are hard to make and easy to break. If you do make a mistake, just flush it out of your mind, get the next one right. One thing I don't do is try and remake mistakes in the name of consistency. Because for one thing, if you're trying to be consistent to anything other than your best judgment and the rule book, you're not going to be able to do it. And you also won't be consistent with the other refs because they're trying their best to be consistent with the rule book and their best judgment. So yeah, that's something I don't do. Any questions at this point? No? Cool. All right, rule interpretation, bending the rules. Rules are not always written as precisely as what we'd like. Sometimes they're translated from other languages. For example, the WRPF English rulebook from about 2016, I'm pretty sure there were some sections that were directly translated from the original Russian and they made no fucking sense at all. There's since been fixed and now it's very clear, but yeah, it used very odd terminology that nobody who's a native English speaker would ever use. Sometimes the rules start out sensible, but then they get extra stuff tacked on year after year after year, and 15 years down the line, they really need to be rewritten, but federations tend to be very risk averse, and when you rewrite the rulebook, you tend to take the risk of, are you going to have unintended consequences by rewriting this rule? Is there stuff that you're going to forget about? Is there stuff that's going to become legal or illegal that wasn't before because you just missed it when you rewrote the rule? So they don't like to do it, which means that we get rule books that have got a bunch of shit tacked on. When there's some ambiguity in a rule, somebody needs to make a call on the correct interpretation. Generally, that'll be the technical officer of the federation, either at the national level or the international level, sometimes when the national technical officer doesn't know. There's been, occasionally I've had questions that I've asked a national technical officer and they didn't know for sure, so they went to the world technical officer and they gave their opinion on it. Now, although you're never going to see it in a rule book, sometimes rules get bent to ensure the fairness of the competition or inclusiveness, the efficient running of the competition, safety, etc., etc. So, for example, if it's a very hot day, we might have a couple of minutes break at the end of each round so the spotters can have a drink. I don't think anybody would have a problem with that, even though technically the rules don't allow for it. A lifter bottoming out on mono slings, that's not covered in any rule book I've ever seen, but I've seen it happen in a comp because the slings weren't low enough, and we consider that a platform error. They were allowed to retake the attempt after the slings had been adjusted. I thought that was in the interest of fairness, even though the rules didn't allow us to do it. You might have a short flight of lightweights, so you might not want to take a break at the end of each round because they don't need it, and why would you want to make the comp run longer than it needs to? Another thing is there were meet directors making accommodations for religious clothing a long time before the rule books actually officially allowed it. Again, I don't think anybody really had a problem with it. It's just a decision that was made at the time of this is in the interest of fairness and inclusiveness, so let's do it. In novice comps, I've seen people squat with safety bars because they can't squat with a straight bar. As a novice comp, you can make your own rules. They weren't going to win the competition, who cares? Stuff like that. More on unsanctioned novice comps. Some people like to ref lenient at a novice comp. I personally don't like to do that. When it comes to the technical rules of performance, the reason I don't is if lifters are looking to progress to sanction meets, it sets them up for failure. It's bad practice for new referees who are often the referees at these novice comps. So if we're trying to assess refs at a novice comp and they're deliberately reffing lenient, then there's no value in it. We can't assess them. And it's also very hard to be fair and consistent when, for example, you're reffing squat depth plus a little bit. Well, how do you do that? How do you be consistent with that? I don't know how to do it. So yeah, that's that. Any questions at this point? Cool. All right. Getting into some of the specifics on specific lifts. For the squat, generally I like to be, because we've got a mono here, I like to be about in line with the front of the mono on a 3-man spot. So I'm looking just past the spotter, in between sort of the plates and the lifter there. The spotter's here, and I'm looking through there. On a 5-man spot, one here, I'm looking between the spotters. And I usually don't have to move too much further, but I'll generally come a little bit further side on. And then I may have to adjust my head position a little bit just to see past the plates. Now, when lifters are walking out their squats, you obviously need a position relative to where they're going to be after you walked out. So that's when it's really handy to have these chairs on casters as opposed to the chairs that I see at a lot of comps which don't. So you either have to shift a long way in the seat or pick them up and move them, which is what I've done before. But yeah, generally a sign of good meet director when you have chairs on casters for the referees. So yeah, as I sort of covered before, lock out on the squat. They need to have their knees locked on our rack, well, before they get the start command, and then come back to that position. You can watch them walking up to the platform to get an idea of what that might look like. In wraps, it can be sometimes kind of harder and easier at the same time. Easy because they can't really bend their knees when they come out to the bar, but they may not have been wrapped in a perfect locked-out position in the first place. But yeah, get as good an idea as you can of what their lockout position looks like, and try and gauge that with the referee. Some commonly misunderstood rules with the squat. Number one, depth. The text in the rule book, in every rule book I've ever seen, except for maybe a couple of American federations, is the top surface of the leg at the hip must pass below the top of the knee. It's not the hip crease, it's not the hip joint, it's not parallel hamstring, whatever that means, because hamstrings aren't flat. It's not the parallel femur, which you wouldn't know because you don't have x-ray vision. So, what is that? Top surface of the leg at the hip. If I go in the middle of my quad, which is at the apex of this here, go up to the top, up to the hip here, it's this point here, okay? And the difference is, if I'm down to the bottom of the squat, my hip crease goes, especially if I'm wearing equipment, my hip crease goes all the way around to here. This is very different to here, but this is what we should be looking for. Judging squat depth from the front, there is no rule book that says that you can't do it. However, realistically, you're going to have a decent margin of error doing this. Now, I don't believe that there should ever be an automatic white on any lift, especially when you've got a 5-man spot. One of the side referees might not see enough in the squat to make a decision. Could be at the end of a long comp, the side ref could brain fart or fall asleep. Who knows? So in a situation like that, I don't want the head ref to go, well, I'm at the front, I can't judge this high. I mean, if I do this, that's high, right? But at some point, especially if I've got my toes pointing straight forward, so my hip's going to be hidden behind my knees or behind my quad behind my knees. Especially if I'm bent over, so my gut's in the way. It's a lot harder to judge depth from the front now. But at some point, you're going to be able to do it. You just have to be aware that there is a big margin for error, and you can only make that call if you don't have to guess to do it. Okay? If you have to guess to call that high, you can't call it high. Yeah, another aspect of that, side refereeing. If your view is obstructed at any point, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't read line for depth. Because, let's say I get down here, spotter's arm comes in front, now you can't see anything. Then I do that, I'm not at depth, right? I mean, there's anatomical realities to deal with here. I can't possibly go from my hip reference point being here to here if I only move that far, right? But again, if you can't see enough of the lift to make the call, you have to guess, well then it's quiet. In GPC, there's a particular rule interpretation around the difference between a step and a stumble. Okay? Because in GPC you can't step back from the monolith squatting. However, if you stumble, you can re-rack, try again within your minute. So the common interpretation people use is a step is a deliberate step back, and a stumble is anything that's not deliberate. The interpretation coming from Lee Marshall, who's the World GPC president, is anything after you achieve stability after receiving the bar from the mono is considered a step. So, one rack, that, stable, and now a step, that's a step. Okay? But one rack, go, oh fuck, that's a stumble, because I was never stable. It's one of those things where the rule book isn't really clear and you have to get an interpretation from somebody who's authoritative in your field. In the IPF, a lot of people believe that the thumb over grip or the falcon grip or the talon grip, this or this or this is not legal. There's really no basis for that. The rule book says that the thumb and fingers have to be gripping the bar. Now, quite obviously, this finger here is gripping the bar because otherwise I'm not gripping this plate. My interpretation anyway is these fingers are all providing gripping force, so they're gripping the bar, so that's legal. But some people will say that it's not. I have had international level referees who agree with me on that, but there are probably some that don't. But yeah, personally I would say it's legal. All right, any questions? Cool. All right, so bench. On a two-man spot, I'll just come around to a bench. I want to be just to this side of the lifter's knees, because this is where I can see where I've got in the frame, I've got their feet, I've got their butt, I've got the bar, I've got their chest where they're touching. So yeah, if I'm too far over here, I'm not going to be able to see the butt lift. If I'm too far around here, I'm not going to be able to see the bar movement. Probably not going to be able to see their feet very well. So I want to be about here. Now I want my eye level to be about close to level with the top of the bench, because otherwise I'm not going to see butt lift. But again, I don't want to be too zoomed in on that I miss everything else. Get everything in the frame. Okay. On a double side spot. Oh yeah, you would have it. Cool. On a double side spot, I'm going to have another spot here, so I want to be a little bit further here. Okay. That's just, it is something of a compromise, but you've got to make the best of the situation you're in. If you're refereeing under IPF rules, you have to deal with elbow depth. That sucks. Generally speaking, what people are doing is they're going a little bit further around towards the feet, and then looking at the armpit versus the elbow. It's an impossible rule to ref as a side ref, but do the best you can, yes. For lifters that have got really tight, compact setups, their hips are going to be really close to their shoulders. So if you're using their hips as a reference point, you've got to be careful you don't go too close, otherwise you're not going to be able to see the bar. You're going to be all close side up to the bar, it's going to be really hard to see downward movement. So just, again, look at what's in the frame, try and frame length. Alright, some commonly misunderstood rules of the bench. The press command is not timed at all. It is as soon as the bar is held motionless on the chest, some lifters are going to be quicker to this than other lifters. Okay? Now, a lifter who receives the bar with their butt in the air and they don't compete in the IPF or USAPL, where you've got the side refs indicating position of the head ref. If I'm the head ref, what I like to do is just put my head inside a little bit and see if I can see their butt coming down before I get the start command. What I also advise their coach or their lift-off person to do is stay in front of the ref until their butt comes down. Because as long as they're there, I'm not going to give the start command. And that prevents me giving the start command. When the side refs see their butts in the air, they give it a red light. Sinking after the press. You can sink the bar into your chest, that's not a problem. What you can't do is sink the bar, get the press command, sink further, and then press it. Okay, that's downward motion, can't do it red light. Getting the start command or the rack command doesn't guarantee that the lifter was in a legal position, okay? This is the opinion of the head ref, right? If I'm a side ref, guy unracks to here, head ref calls start, I'm giving that a red light because he wasn't in a legal position. Okay? Must start with elbows locked. And same deal for the rack command. In the rack command, there's the extra consideration of safety, right? So the guy's here, he's not going to press anymore. He obviously thinks he's locked out and call him rack. I don't want him to just stay there and fucking blow his pec off or something. I mean, I'll give him a red light after that if he's obviously not going to press it out, potentially, but yeah. If I just keep him there forever, that takes the other referees out of the equation, right? Because he's eventually going to fail, then they have to give him a red light. But I could think he's not locked out, the other two referees could think that he is locked out, okay? In GPC, there is a rule which I have not found in any other federations, which is you can't touch the bar below the sternum. Now, it can be difficult to tell where the sternum is on a lifter who's benching, but I mean, if they're going down to their belly, obviously you can't do that. Right, any questions?
Yep.
Yep.
Lifter gets, head ref gives a very quick start command.
Yes.
Lifter isn't in a start position yet.
Yes.
Then they say it's on squat and they have soft knees.
Yep.
And they get a start command.
Yep.
They fully lock out and then start their squat. Is that okay?
No.
Yep.
Well, that's a good question. That's a good question. I'd have to check the rule book on that. I think what you would find is when the commencement signal has been given, that's considered to be the start of the lift.
Yep.
So if they are not in a legal position at the start of the lift, then it's a red.
Yep.
I'll check the rule book for the exact wording on that, but that's what I think. Anything else? No? Cool. Alright, so deadlift.
Well, I guess same question for the bench.
Yeah,
Someone gets a start command before they've lowered their butt to the bench, and then they're still fully locked out, they lower their butt to the bench, and then they actually perform the lift. That's still a red because their
Correct.
ass was off the bench after they got the start command.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, as I say, we'll double check the wording on that, but I'm pretty sure the lift is considered to start when the commencement signal's given. Alright, so on a deadlift, side ref, you want to be pretty much front side, so in line with the front corner of the platform here, on about a 45. The reason for this is, particularly when someone's pulling sumo with a wide stance, you're not going to be able to see their knees past the plates. You can go to the side and to the back. I definitely wouldn't do this for squats. For deadlifts, it's all right. I'd prefer to be front side, but you can make the call from back into the side. Sometimes the platform layout means that you can't be at the front and side, but yeah, that's where I prefer to be. As I covered before, for lockout, look at the lifter's legs when they're walking up to the bar. Yeah, big legs, big quads can look like they're further back than they really are, because you don't get that flat contour that you expect to see. Yeah, so commonly misunderstood rules for deadlift. Ramping or hitching. It's not actually in the rule book. People say ramping as shorthand for supporting the bar on the thighs. So you can't use the thighs to bear the weight of the bar either partially or fully. You can drag the bar up the thighs as long as you're not using the thighs to bear the weight or provide leverage. Down command and how it interacts with the lockout. The down command should be given when the lift is in an apparently finished position. My interpretation of that is when the lifter has finished pulling. They've pulled as much as they're going to pull. Now you give a down command. Then it's up to all three referees to judge whether or not they were locked out. So what some referees will do is they will wait until they believe that the lifter is at a legal lockout before they give the down command. So the problem with this, as I kind of alluded to before with the bench, if the lift is here and the other two referees believe they're locked out, but the head referee doesn't, they have to hold it until they drop it. Well, now it has to be 3 reds when it would have been 2 whites. Okay? So, yeah, as I say, when the lift is apparently finished, you're not going to pull anymore, give them the down command. You can also give the down command for safety reasons, which I have seen before. So someone's obviously failing or they have failed, you want to stop them destroying themselves and potentially having the bar fall on them as they fall backwards or whatever. Give them the down command. Right. I'm just going to pause and go for a piss.
No, like you're committing to like not knowing if you're going to go to work the next day.
Yeah. Alright, cool. Let's keep going again. So, comp day. Some things you might want to bring. You don't necessarily need to bring anything, but these are things that I find help to bring. Food. A lot of the time, meat directors will provide free food, which is nice, but it doesn't always work very well for referees because if you don't have enough referees, you can't necessarily afford to wait in line for 15 minutes while they're preparing whatever it is. If it's messy or you need 2 hands to eat it, or you're not going to be able to eat it when you're reffing, right? If you're head reffing, you can't really eat at all because you need to give commands. So I tend to prefer to take something that I can eat very quickly and then I'm not going to have to wait for. So like protein bars or PB&J sandwiches, I mean it's up to you, but these are things that you may want to consider. For drinks, I tend to just bring water. I probably won't have coffee unless I know I can take a toilet break whenever I need to. So if I need caffeine, I'll generally just use no-goes. I generally don't have sugary drinks because it'll leave my throat dry, and I'll need to not do that if I'm going to be yelling commands. For the same reason, sometimes I like to have throat lozenges or something. Panadol for headaches is handy. It can be handy to have a printed rulebook. This is something that Vicky always has with her. Just so you don't have to wait for your phone to bring up the PDF or whatever. There's a question about the rules. Tape measure. It's good for if there's any question of the platform equipment being within parameters. Someone goes, oh, the bench is too low or whatever. Just whip out the tape measure. This generally tends to be important at nationals or worlds or something like that. Because at a local comp, even if the bench was out of spec, you probably can't do much about it. Spare deadlift socks, because when I bring them, nobody ever needs them. Yeah, phone charger. Now, this is especially important if you're in a situation where you have to use your phone as a ref control, which I don't like, but it happens. I tend to like to arrive earlier than I need to, even if I'm not running a weigh-in or setting up the scoring system or whatever. Just gives me time to settle in, and meet directors appreciate knowing that you're there and that you're not running late. Cool. Now, weigh-in. Obviously this applies on the day that you're running weigh-ins, if you're running 24-hour weigh-ins. Federal has specific procedures for weigh-ins, but there's a few things to be aware of in general. Lifters need to be weighed in by officials of the same sex. In some federations, you can have a referee deputise somebody to do the weigh-in who's not a referee. You say, okay, we need a woman to do the weigh-in, so here you do that. And as long as a referee is running the weigh-in session, that's okay. You need to know what weight class the lift is attempting to make before they weigh in. The reason you need to do that is what happens if they miss weight and what happens if they make weight. Because once you make weight for your nominated weight class, you can't continue weighing in. So you can't go, okay, I'm going for 75 kilos, I'm stepping 4.8, but I think I might tie on total with someone else, so I want to keep weighing in lighter and lighter and lighter in case it's a time body weight. Can't do it. If you're going for 75, once you weigh into that, you're done. Okay? And also you need to decide what's going to happen if they miss weight. If it's a invitational comp, they may not be able to change weight classes. You know, like in nationals, they qualified at 75, they have to weigh in at 75. In some situations, they may be able to lift as a guest lifter. In some situations, they may not be able to lift at all. So, yeah, you need to know what weight class they need to make. Do they need personal ID? In some federations, everyone who weighs in has to have personal ID, like a driver's license or a student card or something. Especially if they're trying to make an age division, they need proof of age. Yeah, if they're a minor, then you need to have a responsible adult, like a parent or a coach or something, present while you're weighing them in. Some feds have rules about this, others don't, but as a general principle, it's a good idea if you can do it. In some federations, you may have to have a working with children check to do that, or some other similar credential like that, depending on where you are. Platform check. This is basically checking that everything's within spec. You know, is the platform big enough? Most feds will say 8 foot by 8 foot or 2.5 metres by 2.5 metres. In some feds, it'll be a matter of checking if the plates in the racks are approved brands. One thing to check, calibration plugs. Now, I don't think the Lecos have them, but the Vancos do. Yeah, perfect example. This is no longer a calibrated plate. So if you find any on the platform, which I've done before, you need to replace them. Usually there'll be something in the warm-up area that you can use instead. But yeah, to be honest, nobody checks it, but technically any record that was set without calibrated plates is not officially a record. Yeah, and as I kind of alluded to before, some of these things you may not be able to remedy on the day. Like if I check the mono heights there and found that they're not, you know, they've got to be no greater than 5 centimetres apart, and go, oh, well, they're actually 6. Well, we're not going to get another mono. But yeah, it's good to get in a routine of checking that the platform is correct. For some feds, there's rules on what surface. Well, every fed has rules on what the surface can be on the platform, but they may be different. Like in the IPF, you have to have carpet on top. GPC, WRPF, other federations, you can have rubber on top. That's fine. Already mentioned the plates. Collars. Make sure the collars are correct. Everyone knows these collars, yeah? These types of collars. Cool. Right, bars. Got to know what kind of bars you need on each lift. You know, especially if a meet director is running a meet in a fed that they're new to, they may not realise that you have to have a squat bar in some feds. They may have a power bar up on the mono or whatever. Likewise for deadlift bars, there is such a thing as a bench bar, which is 30 mil thick, 25 kilos, which is allowed to be used in WPC, which here is capo, and they allow for more heavier weights to be loaded on the bar, and you commonly see it with really, really big equip benches. But yeah, power bars 29 mil, squat bars 32 or 35, deadlift bars 27 mils, we already covered that. Yeah. There are also rules on things like how long they can be between the inside collars, how long the loadable sleeve needs to be, all that sort of stuff. Again, you're probably not going to bother checking that for a local comp because what are you going to be able to do about it? But it's good to know that those rules do exist. Checking out the racks and benches, things like the mono, does the jack work properly? Is there anybody who's going to be too short for the lowest pin height? A lot of the time you can get a big wood block for them to stand on the squat. I haven't personally seen that in local comps here, but I have seen some American comps where the lowest height is actually a bit too high, and so you have really short lifts that have to stand on block to squat. As I kind of alluded to before, do the safety slings go low enough for everybody who's going to squat? These are probably fine. I have seen them where they are up a little bit too high and people bottom out on them. If you've got a combo rack, is it secured to the platform? Usually what you'll see is you can have like a bracket at the front of it and you can screw it into the platform. Another thing you can do if you don't have that is just weigh it down with dumbbells or plates. Dumbbells are probably better. Do you have all the pins? You need 4 pins in a combo. Are the heights suitable? So if you have a particularly short lifter, you can have them squat from the bench hooks if they need to. I've seen that before. With a bench, is the pad legal with respect to the thickness and the width, the height off the floor? For example, that fat pad there would not be legal in most federations. The plate racks, one of my favourites. Are they set up correctly? This is set up correctly, right? I see at a lot of comps, including IPF Worlds, where they are turned around the other way. This is bad. Does anyone know why? The reason why is, if I'm the head ref, I can look at that and I know that all the plates are in the rack. That means none of them are on the bar. If I take out this 10, put it on the bar, I look at the plate rack and go, oh, the 10's not there, it must be on the bar. If they're turned around, all I see is a red. I can't see the small plates, so they need to be arranged. Small plates at the front, big plates at the back. That way I can see everything. And it's also important to consider which way is the bench going to face. Because if the bench faces that way, the refs are going to need to be here, and the plate racks need to be further over there. If we're facing this way, plate racks need to be just further back. Ideally, they have wheels. The Elecos, for example, do not have wheels, so they need to be fully unloaded if you're going to move them, which sucks. The platform layout. Where are the lifters going to come on and off the platform? Where are the refs going to sit? Where are the plate racks going to be? Okay. If these are a little bit further back, ref can sit here, the lifter can go between them, no problem. But a lot of meet directors don't think about that sort of thing. They think about presentation primarily. They don't think about the logistics of you need referees to sit somewhere where they can actually see the lift. So if you can get to the comp early enough and check all this out, it's good to be able to sort it out as early as possible. Because, for example, you might have plate racks that need to be fully unloaded and you need people to be available to help you do that. The light system. You need to know how it works. They do vary from comp to comp, from venue to venue. Test it out, make sure all the lights work, and if they don't, then you know that they don't work. And for example, if there's no middle light, then that means it's a red, for example. Now, some of the different light systems you can see at a comp. There are some light systems that have individual light circuits, such as 6 light circuits, all switched individually. They would not be legal in any fed that I'm aware of. So you hit the red button, the red light comes on. That's it. Another one that you'll see commonly is a master switch setup. So all the lights are wired in series with a master switch, so none of them come on until one of the referees flicks the master switch on, usually the head referee. That's close to being rule compliant. The problem is the head referee needs to time it correctly so that nobody changes their decision after they hit the master switch to come on. So the rules are that the light system has to be set up so that they don't come on until all the referees have made a decision. But if that's based on whether you turn the master switch on and off, well, you can't actually stop the referee changing the decision. If you flick the master switch on too early, someone goes, oh, that was red. Oh, I better change mine to a red. That can happen. So yeah, those are used a lot. Systems like this one, or the one that we have at Strong Geelong, there's a logic controller of some kind there, or some kind of digital logic circuit. So what's happening is, ref hits the button, there's a little computer, or as I said, a logic circuit in there, keeping track of what the decision is. When there's a decision that's complete, it turns all the lights on. Then one of the refs, obviously, you will usually be the head ref, they have a clear button to turn all the lights on and clear the decision state in the logic circuit. And yeah, these are fully rule compliant. They are somewhat more tricky to build. Another one that's commonly used is an internet-based one where you have either an app on your phone or you go to a web browser on your phone and bring up the website. Usually you have to log in with a password that the meet director will give you. And you just hit a button on the website and then, yeah, the lights come on when there's a complete decision. Things to be aware of if you're using one of those. The refs should be warned in advance if they're going to use one so they can make sure that their phone batteries are full, because you don't want your phone battery running out in the middle of a comp if you have to use it to ref. And ideally bring a phone charger with you so you can charge your phone between breaks or whatever. At a lot of big comps, if you're relying on Wi-Fi for the lights and you've got 500 people there that are also all using Wi-Fi, you're going to get congestion, the light's going to be slow, it's going to be shit. And this is often what happens at big comps that are using, say, the lifting cast lights. You've got the lifter standing there, oh, lights, cool. So yeah, I don't like them, but if you can't get hold of a lighting system any other way, that's better than nothing, I suppose. I like to have a quick meeting with the scorers. Now, the problem with that is that before the comp starts is usually the most busy time of the day for the scorers because they're entering data like crazy. But it's good to check if you can. Do they know the rules that they need to know? Like, how far out can you change opening attempts? What are the rules for changing other attempts? How long do the lifters and coaches have to submit the next attempt after a lift? One that's good to check is if the bar and collar weights are correctly configured. One thing that you see a lot is the bar and collars are configured to 25 kilos for the squat instead of 30 kilos for the squat if you're using a squat bar. So the plate loading shows up wrong. One that's not so important, but one thing that I like to do is check the colours of the plates in the scoring system are consistent with what you see on the platform. A lot of the time, like open lifter, for example, default to black for the 10 kilo plates. It can be confusing for the loaders, so I like to change it so that the 10s are green and the 5s are white, and the 1.25s are light grey. Because yeah, it can be confusing trying to tell a 1.25 from a 2.5 from a 5 if they're all black. Any questions at this point? Cool. If possible, and if I haven't worked with them before, I like to meet with the spotters. At the very least to find out their names, because if they load the wrong plate, you can't just yell out, hey dickhead. I mean, you can, but there's 5 of them on the platform, so they're not going to know who you're talking about. But it can help to know, like for example, if they haven't done much spotting before, you may be able to just give them a quick primer of where to stand, what to do with your hands, all that stuff. If you haven't worked with them before, it can be good to know things like how they set up for a 5-man spot so you know where you need to be when they do that, you know. Are they doing this and this, or are they doing this and this? I like to meet with the other refs, just as much as anything to know who's available to ref, so can we take breaks, you know, how many refs have we got? Is there anyone who needs to get more experience in a particular position? Is there anyone who really wants to avoid a particular position for any reason? Yeah, sometimes some referees may have questions about the rules, so it's good to get all that ironed out before the comp. I like to be at the lifters meeting when it's often the meet director, not necessarily the meet director, but where they're talking about, you know, here are the commands we're using this fed, and don't dump the bar on the spotters and all that. Just to know what they're being told, right? Because if they're being told something by the meat director, then you know why they're doing something, right? You know, whether they're going off the platform on the wrong side or something. And sometimes the meat directors forget little details about the rules, and it would be good to just correct them if they need correction. Yeah, if I'm not busy, I like to just wander through the warm-up area. Gets me used to looking at lifts, and it also lets me pick out if there's any illegal equipment that's being used that perhaps the lifters might not know about. For example, there was a comp here probably a year ago where a lady didn't realise that she needed a soft suit to compete, which I wouldn't have known until she came up to lift if I hadn't gone through the warm-up area. Luckily, we were able to find her a spare one and she was able to lift. But other things that I tend to notice a lot is padded belts. You can't use those in any federation I'm aware of, or belts with Velcro closure, can't use those. Elbow sleeves on the squat in certain federations are legal and not legal in other federations, and sometimes depends on the equipment division that you're in. But yeah, I've seen people warming up to squat with elbow sleeves and going, you know, you can wear that in the warm-up area, do you realise you can't compete with that? And they didn't actually realise it. So it's good to do that if you can. Taking breaks. If you're not experienced, you want to ease into it. I would generally recommend taking a break after every 2 flights or so if you're not sure. When you get more experience, you tend to learn what your limits are better, and you know when you can push it and when you can't. If I'm taking a break, I generally like to get some fresh air and sunlight if I can. Communication with lifters and coaches. Remember, we're here to help lifters and help them have as good of a day as they can, while maintaining the standards, obviously. But we're not there to, you know, catch them out and punish them and whatever. You know, if they've got questions, you know, try and answer them. You know, if they look like they don't know something that they need to know, point it out and tell them. You know, like maybe they don't realise that they have to wait for a command or something like that. Like they may come from a federation where they don't have a start command on the bench, stuff like that. I like to check a lifter's equipment when they're waiting to lift. Because once, for example, if I'm head reffing, once I've caught bars loaded, I know the bar's loaded correctly, I don't really have anything that I need to do until the lifter sets up. So I can use that time, or if I'm side reffing and I happen to be in a position to see them, I can just give them a quick check, okay, yeah, belt's fine, wrist straps are fine, knee wraps, whatever, all fine. If I see anything that needs to be corrected, I can bring it to their attention before they actually start to lift and becomes a problem. Like sometimes the lifter's soft suit will be down here, they just need to pull it up, or maybe, I don't know, they might have their socks touching their knee sleeve or something like that, which you can't do. I don't think I've ever seen a lifter deliberately try and cheat with respect to equipment, but it does happen. For example, there was a comp in, it was an IPF-based comp, these university games or something, where a lifter was wearing squat briefs underneath her soft suit in raw, and it would take a very good eye to pick that up, but they did pick it up. Or there was that famous incident with the lifter wearing a slingshot under his t-shirt. Which, I mean, if you walk around like this, it's a bit sus.
I've seen them do the wraps, knee sleeves on top.
Yeah, saw that too. Another one I've heard about is stuffing a knee wrap under the bench shirt to bring the chest up.
That's
Make it easier to touch.
yeah. Oh, okay.
That was Dave Hoff.
I heard the one about diapers to make your butt bigger for bench press.
What's that?
Diapers
Oh,
to
right.
make your butt bigger for bench press.
Yeah, well,
So
that,
then you can get this far off.
Yeah. Right.
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that would be illegal underwear, I would suspect, but how are you going to tell?
Just got a dumpy, bro.
Yeah.
Just check that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. With respect to the lifter's setup, there's different rules in different feds. Like, for example, in the IPF or APL, if the lifter is, for example, trying to start the bench press with soft elbows, what you do is you wait for 5 seconds. If they haven't achieved a start position, then you say replace the bar, give the rack signal, and then explain to them why they didn't get the start command. In GPC or capo, well, not capo because they don't have a start command on the bench, but in GPC I can just yell at them, lock your elbows, and then they can start. But yeah, I like to err on the side of just telling the lifter as quickly as possible, just so they don't run down their time for no good reason. But yeah, in some feds there are specific rules on this. Commands. Be loud and clear, and for most people that means being louder and clearer than you think you are. Remember that the other refs have to hear you as well. This is something I've struggled with certain refs. I just can't hear them give their command, especially, for example, when it's a rack command on a bench and it's the third attempt and you're really grinding it out and the crowd gets loud. They get here, the rack command is presumably given, but I didn't hear it. So it can be dicey as to what decision to make there. So yeah, as I say, be nice and loud. I like to use the hand signals on the bench even when I don't have to, but yeah, it's up to you and the rules of the federation as to whether you do that. Obviously, you need to be in sync with your voice commands, your hand commands, and use nice big movements. I've seen some, particularly newbie refs, use little movements which, if you've got a guy who's on the verge of blacking out, coming up on a squat, they're not going to see that. It needs to be big. Explaining decisions. Pretty much every rulebook I've ever seen says the ref only needs to provide an accurate statement like, I thought that was high, or I thought he jumped the start command. There's not to be any real argument or debate to be entered into from there. If the coach or the lifter disagrees, that's fine, but you know, you're not going to change the decision, right? If they're polite to you, be polite back to them. You know, as I said, we're here to help them and here to help them have as good a day as they can. Yeah, just be friendly if they're friendly to you. They just take the information and go. Pretty much every federal rulebook I've ever seen says you cannot receive video during a competition. So if someone pulls out their phone and says, hey, look at that, you say, no, not going to happen. You know, I'm sorry. You can say, I'm sorry if you want to. You know, I'm sorry I can't receive video during the competition. The rules don't allow it. The one exception that I've made for this is if they're going to show me a video that shows the bar was loaded incorrectly and that they need to have a retake of that attempt. That's it. Okay, if it's squat depth or jumping a command or not jumping a command or whatever, no. And if they have further complaints, just tell them to go to the meet director. The meet director's probably going to tell them to fuck off anyway. But it gets them away from you. Spotting misloads. Officially, this is the head ref's responsibility, but in practice, it's everybody's responsibility. The side refs are going to have the best view of their own side being loaded, and the best access to yell at the spot. Like, if I'm here, this spot is loaded the wrong plate, and it's a noisy comp, he's going to hear the side ref before he hears me. That's not to say that I wouldn't bring it to his attention if I see it, but from the point of view of the side ref, you know, you should take responsibility for your side being loaded correctly. But as I say, officially it is the head ref's responsibility. So the head ref is the one who calls bars loaded. They have to be satisfied that it's loaded correctly. Ideally, you want to watch the plates going on the bar as the head ref, but if the plate racks are set up correctly, you can also use those. It's good to know, to have a basic idea of plate maths. So for example, I know that if we're using a squat bar and competition collars, 4 reds is 230. Okay, so if I see 5 reds, it can't possibly be that. Or if it ends in 0.5, I know that has to be a 1.25 on each side. So if there's a 2.5 on the end, weight's not loaded correctly. Just things like that. If I see a weird number on the end, like it's 251, we're going to be using fractions. Now sometimes you can actually catch that the scoring system hasn't been set up correctly when you see that. Like for example, if you see the number is 230, but the loading chart says 4 reds and a 2.5, well it must be set up for a 20 kilo bar. But there are certain situations that are high risk for misloads, so it's a good idea to know what they are and take extra care around them. At the end of the round, when red plates are coming off, especially if it's a lot of reds, like for example, if we're going to 6 reds down to 4, it can be hard to visually tell the difference between the number of reds when there's a lot of them on the bar. So if you need to count them individually, I'd usually do that from about 6 reds. Okay. 4 or 5 I'm usually good not to count them individually, but from 6 on, yeah, I have to make particular effort to count them. Or the other way around, when there's lifts coming, when there's extra reds coming on. So say if there's one big lift at the end of the round, we're going from say 4 reds to 6 reds, or 5 to 7, or something like that. If there's been a bar dump or an equipment failure, the bar has to be stripped and reloaded. It's not going to be, you know, just the one operation of plate on, plate off, that sort of thing. And there will have been chaos going around, so sometimes the bar's being loaded while the referees are attending to something else, like the lifters had injuries, people are trying to get their wraps off and stuff like that. So you're not necessarily watching the bar being loaded. If that is the case, then you need to make sure you check once everything's settled down before you call bars loaded. Similarly, if there's a short flight and there's a break at the end of the round, make sure you watch the bar being loaded before you go for the break. This is something I fucked up once and won't do that again. You get into the end of a long comp, people are fatigued, spotters are fatigued, the refs are fatigued. It can be easy to let things slip by. Yeah, if you're aware that you're becoming fatigued, just try and switch on a little bit more, or take a break if you can. If you've got a record attempt using fractional plates, some spotters I've seen, I like when they do this, is they'll show the ref a fractional plate before they put it on, just because it can be hard to see. Like this plate is barely any bigger than the collar. It's very hard to see once it's on the bar. Yeah, this is a 0.25. But yeah, if I see a weight that's ending in 0.5, that's not a multiple of 2.5, so let's say 250.5, I know it's going to be a 0.25 each side. All right, any questions? All right, training. I already kind of covered this before. Walking around the gym, watching people lift, get practice and checking depth, give people command on the bench if they're prepping for comp. It's usually very handy for people to do that. You can even practice checking plate loading. You know, you just see a bar and go, oh, that's however many kilos. It's yeah, good practice to get into. It'll obviously be harder for referees who struggle with maths, but yeah, it's good practice, I find. Have regular discussions with other refs about things like rule interpretations. Keeps the rules fresh in your head, keeps the rules fresh in their head, and it can be good to iron out little, you know, issues, misinterpretations, all that. Sometimes I'll think that the rule is one thing, someone else will think the rule is something else. They'll go, oh, actually, I didn't think of that. I'll ask Vicky or whoever what the correct interpretation is. You should, however, when you're doing this, avoid throwing other refs under the bus. Like, you know, in general, you shouldn't be going, oh, that guy, whatever his name is, said the rule is this, what an idiot, you know. That's just general common sense, I guess. If there's a more senior ref at the comp, who's a kind of a mentor to you, ask them for feedback. You know, were you consistently getting anything wrong? There's something else you could be doing, that sort of thing. So mentors and mentees. What makes a good mentor? Somebody who's approachable, somebody who's knowledgeable, somebody who's experienced, and somebody who's patient, somebody who's going to not have a problem with you asking them questions, somebody who's going to be, you know, not think that you're an idiot for asking questions, and someone who has the knowledge to answer them. For example, I found, she's not reffing anymore, but Zoe Kruger, Vicky Jewson, who I think all of you will know, Mason Jardine, who's the head of reffing in Capo, There's a few others that I have, but those are probably the main ones. It doesn't necessarily have to be a ref who's more senior than you are. It can be just somebody who has a good thought process and is good to bounce ideas off of. Now, as far as being a good mentee goes, this person who's being mentored, be inquisitive, be enthusiastic, look for opportunities to ref and look for opportunities to learn, be willing to ask questions, and yeah, someone who's good at identifying appropriate mentors is obviously good, and be humble. Don't think that you have all the answers and go in thinking that you do, because when you're given the answers, you're not going to take them in. Leveling up, how to get better. Revise your rule knowledge a lot. This is something I probably should do more than I do, but I try and do it as much as I can. This can include learning new rules that have just been introduced, new areas of the rule book that have been introduced, but obviously going over old ones as well. Seek opportunities to ref. Personally, I like to get in about 10 to 15 comps per year. Some people won't be in a position to do that many, and you do need to be aware of the possibility of burnout, and don't let yourself get exploited. If you need a break and you can't ref every comp that you're asked, then that's fine. You're not obliged to say yes to every single comp that you're asked to ref. And obviously we all have lives outside of refereeing powerlifting. One thing that I have done is get qualified in multiple feds so I can get more experience. I have refed a lot of novice comps, especially when I was first starting. Meet directors tend to love people who are asking for opportunities to ref because they tend to have trouble finding refs. So if you go to a meet director and say, hey, I'm a ref, I want to get more experience, can I ref your novice comp? They'll say, fuck yeah, please do ref. You can look to increase your qualification in the federation. That might involve a written exam, it might involve a practical exam, it might involve both. You should look to gain experience gradually in higher and higher pressure situations, like world record attempts, more prestigious comps, things like that. The more experience you get in those situations, the better you're going to be. The less freaked out you're going to be when it happens in the future. Contributing to the ref community is good. As I sort of talked about before, discussing rules and situations with other refs, when you're in a position to do so, mentoring other refs, and even just the process of teaching other refs forces you to revise things, because you need to get it straight in your head before you talk about it with other people. Any questions at this point? Oh, cool. All right, social media. Now, the usual stuff about it's a blessing and a curse, blah, blah, blah. It's great for connecting with other refs and discussing things. It's not so great when it gives everybody the global megaphone to give their opinions when they don't have any basis to give them. Lifters sometimes are going to vent and complain. It's generally not a good idea to respond in any kind of way. It's just going to be, eventually their complaint's going to be forgotten about and nobody will care. And realistically, their opinion doesn't count for anything. The result doesn't change. It's not going to change the opinion of anybody who actually matters. So yeah, in general, engaging is not a great idea. If you are worried about a decision you've made that someone's blown up on social media about, then ask a more senior ref whose opinion that you respect, i.e. a mentor, what they think. If you fucked up, then just try not to do it again. If you do feel like you're being personally targeted, you can raise it with the federation if you feel like it's necessary. I personally haven't ever felt like that was necessary, but yeah, there are some people who perhaps that would be something they need to do. There have been situations where I've made a mistake and actually apologised for it. You don't have to do that at all, really, but if you feel inclined, it can go a long way to, restoring good relations with other people. Yeah. Now, what you post, you do need to maintain the appearance of impartiality. So you don't want to say, post, this guy's competing, he's going to squat high, and then he shows up in red lights, and maybe it was a close call, and people go, oh, look at that guy, he was prejudiced. You already decided the guy was going to squat high. You don't want to do that. Even if you really are impartial, this is why I say the appearance of impartiality. You can't look biased even if you're not, right? People have to be able to trust you. Don't criticise lifters or coaches personally. Avoid criticising other refs. Now, you can give constructive criticism. You know, you can ask somebody, hey, why did you make that decision? You know, did you realise the rule is actually this or whatever? But don't do it on, in public on social media. If you feel like you can stimulate some positive discussion around a rule, then feel free. All right, that's all I've got prepared. Has anyone got any Q&A that I haven't covered?
Maybe your duty as a ref. Sometimes, say someone walks onto the platform and their thumb lips are in.
Yes.
Warning them as opposed to letting them miss, I guess. Or then, if you were going to, in the case where you didn't notice the thumb lips were still in, but they've now just finished their squat, do you read it, or are you writing it and you let them know for next lift?
Good question. There are actually rules covering this in some feds. Like, for example, in APL, well, actually now in APL as of this year, you can have your thumb lips on.
Okay.
But before that, it was considered a minor infraction, so you can let it go the first time.
Okay, I can see.
Generally speaking, I'll just yell at them, hey, thumb loops,
Yeah.
and they take them off. If it's in a federation where that's something that the referee's allowed to do. If it wasn't noticed, to be honest, I probably wouldn't give them a red light, and then just tell them and make sure that they know for next time. I mean, to be honest, even if you did, then if it hadn't been brought to the lifters' attention, you're probably going to be the only referee who gives them a red light anyway.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it probably doesn't really matter.
Yep.
Yeah.
But as far as the general principle goes, that's probably what I would do. Anything else?
You mentioned before there are a couple of feds that do allow elbow sleeves for
Yep.
squats. What feds are they?
In Capo, they're allowed in Raw Plus, which is referred to as Classic Raw in the WPC rulebook. And all equipped divisions, they're allowed in the squat and the deadlift. In GPC, they're allowed in the equipped division on squat and deadlift. In APL, they are allowed in, I think they're allowed in the squat and deadlift in all divisions. I have to check that. I'm pretty sure they are though. Anything else?
I've got one that's
Yep.
very, very specific.
Sure.
Because I've seen it in comp where someone unracked their bench
Yeah.
and it's still inside the books.
Oh, okay.
Yeah? So it's never going to go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They're allowed to attempt the bench and obviously fail.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, would you tell them to replace the bar because it's going to be an immediate red light as soon as they do anything? Would you tell them to replace the bar, fix it, and then try and do the attempt?
Okay, so they've unracked and they're waiting for the start command.
They've unracked, they're waiting for the
But
start.
they're not
command.
far out enough to clear the hooks.
Yeah.
Okay.
So deeper hooks, but
Yep.
they're only like this far off the rack.
Interesting. As far as the rule book's concerned, they're in a legal position to start that lift.
Yeah.
And if they bang on the hooks and miss groove as a result, then sucks to be them, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, however, this is a situation where you could probably exercise discretion for safety reasons, and you could say, replace the bar.
Yep.
You're not going to clear the hooks. If it's a situation where they've only got maybe 10 seconds left on the clock, maybe you don't do that because they're going to time out if you do that. But yeah, as I say, strictly by the book, I don't think you would. But yeah, exercising discretion and bending the rules in the name of safety, you probably should do it.
Just
Yep.
adding onto that, like clipping the bar on the way up. I mean, the
Yep.
hooks on the way up. Would that,
In every feed that I've ever been in, that I've known the rules of, that would only be a red light if it was done deliberately to assist the lift.
it's not going to be that.
So, yeah, the only situation I could think of where it might is if you're setting up way back and you're kind of using it like a poor man's Smith machine,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
but then you still have to deal with the hook at the top.
Yeah.
So
Not really.
I've never seen it happen. I can only imagine that somebody did it once and the Fed said, right, nobody can do that again.
Yeah, okay.
So they added it to the rule book. But yeah, if it's incidental and accidental and doesn't help the lifter, then no.
Yeah. I've seen one where they've lifted the entire rack up. Like, so these
Yeah.
up.
Oh, on the way up.
Oh,
Yeah, so they've got stuck under the
right.
hooks and lifted these up. It's still locked out, and then the spotters have had to put off the rack and push it back in.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you get that strong?
Good lift.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
Yeah, maybe one last one.
Sure.
If, let's say the safeties were set too high,
Yep.
and they've hit the safeties at the bottom,
Yep.
but it wasn't a spotter loader malfunction, it was actually what they had written on their attempt card.
Yep.
Is that Reds?
If it meant that they didn't touch the chest, then yes.
Yes. Oh, so
Otherwise-
it's touching chest and upper?
I don't believe that would be a red line.
Okay.
I'd have to check the rule book to be certain. If it was done deliberately to assist the lift, then it would be. Then it would fall into the category of using the rack to assist the lift.
Would you then just make a note that they have to put it down for the next account?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they obviously would know that
Yeah.
themselves, you would
Yeah.
think, but yeah. Yeah, I have actually hit the safety before myself lifting and still got the lift.
Yeah.
It didn't help or hurt really.
No.
But yeah. Good question though. Anything else? No. Cool. All right. Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for doing that.
I hope everybody learned something.
Must be